What book truly terrified you? Hello guys and welcome to I Love Reading, a channel about interesting book-related subreddit topics. If you love our content, please press the like button, leave a comment and lastly, if you're new here, subscribe to our channel. Now let's get started. I have just finished reading Ghost Story by Peter Straub. The way the novel is structured, I had a hard time putting it down. Not to mention some passages truly terrified me. I have read books that are disturbing, but not quite on the realm of terrifying, if you know what I mean. I would really like to know your thoughts on this. It can definitely help me kill some time while I'm on my self-imposed hibernation. The Jaunt. A story by Stephen King about the newly commonplace method to travel by teleportation. Though certain rules need to be followed. I read it too young in 7th grade maybe, and it still sticks with me. Longer than you think, Dad. It's longer than you think. I think there must be a whole mini generation of us who read these books too young. My dad had all of them on his bookshelf in the 80s and 90s, and his general rule was that if I was old enough to read the back and be interested in the book, I could read it. Reading all of Stephen King and my mom's V.C. Andrews books while going through puberty may have messed me up a little. But you know, in a good way. Blindness, Waiting for Barbarians, and The Road are all really scary when you think about how quickly people can turn on each other in crisis. Same for lots of war non-fiction books. I could barely stomach some of the stories in World War II books I've read. Stuff like The Fall of Berlin and Rape of Nanking is just stomach-turning when you see the amount of hatred people can have for each other. For straight horror it scared me so much in the 5th grade that I had to stay up all night to finish it. Hatchet when I was a kid. Being stuck out in the cold like that would be a nightmare. Flowers for Algernon. Knowing that you will lose everything and not even realize it after the fact. Bone Clocks by David Mitchell. Mitchell has a way of conjuring these probable seeming apocalyptic near futures that are disconcerting as fuck. They're not cute like Hunger Games, just too real in our seemingly inexorable slide into those futures. Slade House, also by him, is also masterfully scary in a different way. Pet Sematary by Stephen King. When King himself admits that it's his most terrifying novel and that he had no real intentions of having it published, then you know it's got to be good. I had nightmares for a week. And the question of what I would do in the main character's situation haunts me still. The Collector. Half of the book is from the perspective of an absolute psychopath that kidnaps and rapes his victim in a lottery-funded remote bunker. The self-delusion and twisted logic he uses to justify his acts is really mind-blowing. The other half is from the victim's perspective, and the shock and desperation is disturbing. The fact that this book was found in the possession of quite a few real-world monsters just adds another layer to it. Like, there are people who relate to this but in the real world? Multiple levels of awful here. The Hot Zone. Truly frightening what Ebola does to a person. If you like that one you should read Crisis in the Red Zone as well, which is his newer book about Ebola. It gave me the same kind of fear for my life that the Hot Zone did. Prey by Michael Crichton. I've been afraid of nanotech ever since. Nanomachines? Michael Crichton was the first Black Mirror for me. He was a scholarly person and heavily studied his book subjects. I've read all his books, and so many have a horror element that you could see happening in the not-so-far future. Love his stuff. Misery. Its ability to make you feel like it could happen makes it so terrifying. It's not like other Stephen King novels. I know it's fiction, but every time I read it gives me chills. Simple Answers but both Animal Farm and 1984. I couldn't sleep after reading 1984. I was depressed after reading 1984. I still rather love it though. Rather, I should say I'm fascinated by it. 1984, Brave New World, and Fahrenheit 451 are my favorite dystopian stories for their equally fascinating yet completely different outlooks on potential futures. World War Z. I literally had a dream where a zombie was standing in my doorway just staring at me. It's a great book, though. This book completely freaked me out as well. It was written in such a realistic way that I started to think maybe we did have a zombie apocalypse. The Exorcist. Couldn't sleep for a few days while reading it. I read it all in one night because I was too scared to stop. I had some weird things going on around me after that book. Might have just been me being scared, but it went on for a few months. Dreams in the Witch House by H.P. Lovecraft. It's considered even by him to be his worst work, but it was the one story of his that scared me the most. The horror doesn't start from someone who just so happens to stumble on some abandoned city or Lovecraftian monstrosity. It's just some college student who rents a room in a house and basically Nyarlathotep just kicks down the door and goes, "You picked the wrong house, fool," and slowly starts ruining the guy's life. Salem's Lot by Stephen King. I read it in middle school. I can't actually remember how scary it was or basically anything else about it. But when I finished it at 2 in the morning, it freaked me out so much that I watched Terminator to try to bring myself back down. The Shining and Gerald's Game by Stephen King. Also Battle Royale, but it's worth mentioning that book has a huge 18+ sign on its cover, and I read it at 14, because what 14 years old can be stopped by an 18+ sign? Certainly not me, so of course it shook me. Now I'd probably find it disturbing but interesting. I presume it is okay to mention a non-English book. When I was 15 years old, read a book called Tulsi Dala by Vamsi. It was a ghost story written in the Kannada language. The book scared me so much I wouldn't step out of the house after dark for over a month. The narration, the scenery, the tragedy of the little girl in the story scared the hell out of me. For the record, now I read only English books. A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. Spooked me out in a way a book hadn't in years, plus some interesting discussion on the treatment of mental illness, particularly for women. I haven't read it since I was about 17, but Shatter by Michael Robotham scared the absolute shit out of me for weeks. Jumping at sounds and flashing lights, nightlight on, the works. Hoping to reread soon and see if it holds up. One of my favorite things to do is read scary books, alone, in the middle of the night, and creep myself out. It's cool because it's not real and can't hurt me. Pet Sematary and Cujo were both fun. Stephen King is the master. Joyce Carol Oates' Zombie was really upsetting to read. It's loosely based on the life of Dahmer from the perspective of a serial killer. Oates is really great at showing the complexities of the human psyche, especially in terms of darker thoughts. Level 26 by Anthony E. Zucker and Duane Swierczynski. I have a problem with mouths. If there is anything weird with mouths I will, for sure, have nightmare for weeks. And that book. OMG, it was scary like hell but so addictive. I just couldn't put it down and ended up having nightmares for weeks after finishing it. I couldn't even read the next 2 books. Yes, because, as if one was not enough, it had to be a trilogy. Raven's Gate by Anthony Horowitz scared me so much I actually stopped reading it halfway through. It took me 6 months to pick it back up again. I was way too good at visualizing everything. I was basically watching a movie, not reading words. I was shook. Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. My mother recommended it to me when I was 13. She forgot to mention it's listed as horror. I was not prepared to read all about the torture of those children. It's the first book in the series of 5, and I believe I read the first 3. I think about going back and rereading them, but yeah. I don't know. So creepy. Ghost Story is excellent. Shirley Jackson is another good author in the same type of storytelling. She wrote the story that The Haunting of Hill House is loosely based on. The book is very good and worth the read. Turn of the Screw by Henry James is similar, but can be a difficult read. I recently read Paul Tremblay's Head Full of Ghosts, and the ending was, whoa. It is probably the book that came closest to being truly frightening to read in a long time for me. I hear good things about House of Leaves, but have not read it yet. The books that terrify me most are the ones that are true or based closely on true stories. John Douglas's series on being an FBI profiler, Mindhunter is his first book, is excellent and horrifying. I also found Lord of the Flies to be fairly terrifying. The Book of the Unnamed Midwife terrified me. Like, would the world be that way, constant rape, if everything totally broke down and there were hardly any women? I barely got through the first half, the second half was less violent. It was very difficult to read. There you have it, books that truly terrified Reddit users. Note: books talked about in the video can be accessed through the link on the description below. Thank you for watching till the end. If you loved the video, don't forget to press the like button and also subscribe to I Love Reading. See you on the next video.